know if you've noticed, bit of an energy crisis at the moment. For the second time this quarter, President Trump has authorized military force in a foreign country to try and secure oil supplies. Did it in Venezuela, now they've done it in Iran. And in response, Iran has closed the Strait of Hormuz, and that has led to oil and gas prices skyrocketing. And this has caused a global energy crisis, with different countries responding in different ways. I mean, the Philippines, for example, just declared a national emergency over energy because there's about 30 days left of fuel in the whole country. Meanwhile, here in the UK, there's been a very loud debate over whether we should be increasing production of domestic oil and gas, meaning extracting more oil and gas from the North Sea, with proponents being on the political right, the Conservatives under Kemi Badenoch and Reform UK under Nigel Farage, saying that doing so would improve our energy security, and Reform UK actually going further and saying doing so would reduce our energy bills. And as you can probably tell from the title of this video, this is complete bollocks. And I want to talk about why through the lens of the three things that any energy system has to accomplish. It has to provide energy in a way that is affordable, in a way that is secure, and a way that is sustainable and can be done for a long time. And if you've seen one of my videos before, you'd probably expect me to harp on about the last one of those three, about the sustainability aspect. But to be honest, we are going to talk about it, but we don't even need to invoke it to demonstrate why this is a very stupid plan. Let's consider the hypothetical where the UK government issues new licenses for oil and gas drilling in the North Sea. Those licenses will be bought by private companies, and that's the end of the government's involvement, right? Private companies will then go ahead, build infrastructure, extract that oil and gas, and then they will sell it to the international market at international market prices. There are no conditions or regulations that require companies operating in British waters to sell oil and gas to Britain. Even if it's just coming a couple of miles offshore, it goes on the international market. This is the case now under the Labour government, and it is very much the case when the Conservatives are in power. I mean, when they were most recently in power, they said they would be very much against forcing private companies, well, I mean, to do anything, but in this case specifically, selling their fuels just to the UK. Increasing production in the North Sea will produce some oil and gas, but it's not going to flow to the UK. It is going to flow to where the international market dictates, who can afford to pay the price that's set. So from an energy security perspective, it doesn't help us at all. You could argue that doing so would still potentially decrease our energy bills because these companies would be making money in the UK and so they could be taxed. However, the parties pushing for this are not exactly big on taxation of private companies, with the alternative, I suppose, being enough oil and gas being produced in British waters that affected the international market, right? But about that, I'll show you two graphs here which show the expected production in the North Sea from oil and gas. If you look at the gas one specifically, which is the fuel we care more about in the UK, it's currently expected that production by 2050 will decrease by 97%. Whereas if you were to issue new licenses for all the discoveries that we know about of natural gas in the North Sea, production would still decrease. In fact, it would still decrease by 95%. The fact is, there is not very much left in the North Sea, certainly not enough to influence the international market. I mean, just to put this in perspective, the UK produces about 0.7% of all oil and gas worldwide. It's a little under 600,000 barrels of oil per day. Compare that to the 400 million barrels that the International Energy Agency released in response to Iran blockading the Strait of Hormuz, right? 400 million barrels released in a week barely changed the price. So if you think that a tiny increase in the already small output of the North Sea is going to change the international markets, I'm sorry, but it's just not going to happen. So from an energy affordability perspective, the first one of those conditions I mentioned, expanding production in the North Sea doesn't help us. It doesn't make our energy cheaper, it doesn't significantly increase taxation, and it's not going to significantly impact the international market. And it's also not going to do anything quickly. I mean, the process of going from a new license to actually extracting oil and gas and selling it to consumers takes about 10 years. Like, this isn't some emergency measure that we can just deploy and expect to result in 6 months. This is going to do nothing to help the fuel crisis that we are currently experiencing. Whereas there are options available to us that we can deploy much faster. In fact, the government is rolling out. I'll talk about those in just a moment, because I just want to address something that I imagine people would say in response to everything I've said so far, which is that a couple of days ago, as of recording this, there was a segment on Sky News by a guy called Ed Conway, who I know has done good work before, basically making the economic case for North Sea oil and gas. Now, I want to be clear, this isn't my analysis of this. This has come from someone who knows far more about the oil and gas market. This is from Tessa Khan at Climate Breakthrough on LinkedIn. But basically, she points out that the figures that went into that analysis on Sky News come from Offshore Energies UK, which is this industry lobbying group for offshore energy. And those figures are much more optimistic than what I have just presented to you. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Firstly, the figures that come from this Offshore Energies lobbying group assume that the windfall tax is going to be removed from oil and gas producers. To remind you, the windfall tax was introduced in the aftermath of Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022, when the price of oil and gas, just like now, shot up. And suddenly, oil and gas producers based in the UK were making monumental profits while consumers were paying much higher bills. That didn't seem fair to people in government, so they slapped an extra tax on those oil and gas producers, who, let's be clear, hadn't done anything to actually make more money. They just sat there while the price of their commodity shot up for factors that were out of their control. Anyway, the tax was put on in the middle of an energy crisis and a cost of living crisis. And so the idea that this tax is going to be removed in the middle of an energy crisis, in the middle of a cost of living crisis, is not going to happen. As Tessa says on LinkedIn, it is, to put it mildly, tone deaf to assume that that is going to be the case. And this is significant because removing that tax from the producers means that they're going to have a lot more capital at their disposal, which means they can access parts of the North Sea that are currently too expensive to justify extracting. And so those figures that went into the Sky News segment were based on oil and gas that is currently economically unviable to extract, and in some cases technologically unviable to extract. The industry body described the figures that went into this report, the industry themselves described it as beyond realistic. And it's for this reason that the government's figures on how much oil and gas is actually accessible in the North Sea is significantly lower than the data presented on Sky News, the data that came from this trading body. The amount that's left in the North Sea is low, and it keeps trending down. So just to quickly recap, there is not much oil and gas left in the North Sea, and less than the industry claims that it can access. Trying to pump it out is not going to flow to the UK, for one thing, because it gets sold to the international market. So it doesn't improve energy security, and it doesn't have a large enough effect on the international market to change the price at all. So it doesn't improve the security or the affordability of our energy system. But then there's that last bit that I mentioned, the sustainability aspect. Let's be clear, fossil fuels are the reason we are in a climate crisis. Yes, there are other contributions to it, notably from agriculture, but burning coal, oil and gas is the reason why our planet is heating up faster than at any time in recent history. Just because oil and gas is off our coast does not mean that we should burn it. In fact, if we want to keep the planet at a habitable temperature, we need to leave oil and gas in the ground. Estimates vary about how much warming would take place if you burned all reserves. I mean, one estimate is that if you burned all the fossil fuels in the ground, the planet would warm by 8 degrees Celsius. And that would be great for shareholders for a really short period of time. And analysis has demonstrated that any increase in drilling in the North Sea would not be compatible with the UK sticking to a 1.5 degrees warming trajectory. Whether or not that's something that's even technically possible anymore is a whole other debate. The point remains that we are talking about increasing our greenhouse gas emissions at a time when, I'd just like to point out, a couple of months ago, we heard from the Joint Intelligence Chiefs via a report that the government didn't want to publish because they feared the public backlash, that every single ecosystem, every major ecosystem the UK depends on, is on a trajectory to collapse because of climate change and because of deforestation. We are seriously considering the idea of increasing our emissions, given that we know that fact. But there has been an interesting argument made for the UK's oil and gas supplies being more environmentally friendly than gas from elsewhere that I do just want to touch on. So there's a claim that's come from various people, notably Claire Coutinho from the Conservatives, that has said that British oil and gas is 4 times less impactful in terms of the environment than imported liquefied natural gas. And there's an element of truth to this. The process of extracting that gas and then getting it to the consumers, if you look at the UK versus imported, which basically means from the USA, LNG, yeah, it is about a 4-to-1 difference. But extracting the oil and gas and getting it to the consumer is not where most of the impact of gas as a fuel comes from. Most of it comes from burning the fuel. And when you compare the environmental impact of burning North Sea oil and gas versus American LNG, there's not that much of a difference. But also, the UK currently supplies about half of its gas, right? About 50%. We import about 15% of our gas from the Americans. The rest of it is imported from Norway via a pipe. And the funny thing is, the gas from Norway is even less impactful than UK gas. So if you wanted to make the argument that, well, you want to keep using gas but limit its environmental impact, then we shouldn't be expanding our production in the North Sea. We should just be buying more from the Norwegians. But that is still tying us to the fuel that we know is causing the climate crisis and is causing the single largest crisis that we face as a society. So you might well ask, well, hang on, why is anybody promoting this then? Why are the Conservatives and why are Reform pushing this so hard? And firstly, it's a simple answer to a complex problem. Generally speaking, parties on the political right really like simple messaging and saying, we have some oil and gas in our backyard, why don't we just drill it and then we can save money, is a simple idea to communicate to somebody. The reality is much more complicated. But secondly, and more importantly, we know that there are extensive links between those two parties and the fossil fuel industry. I mean, we know that in the 5 years running up to the last general election, over 90% of donations to Reform UK came from climate deniers and fossil fuel interests. We know that the Conservatives have extensive ties with anti-climate science groups like the Global Warming Policy Foundation, who say that carbon dioxide has been demonized and it should be 2 or 3 times its concentration in the atmosphere. In fact, Kemi Badenoch ran her campaign to become head of the Conservatives from the home of the chair of Net Zero Watch, which is one of the UK's most prominent climate denial organisations. I'm sure it's just a coincidence that the loudest voices pushing for more production in the North Sea are very close friends with the only group of people that would benefit from us doing so. The only way that this would make any sense whatsoever is if there were absolutely no alternatives. But as I've already mentioned, there are alternatives. Alternatives that the government, fortunately, are pursuing really quite aggressively. To return to the 3 criteria I mentioned, we know obviously that renewables produce less carbon emissions than fossil fuels. We also know that they make energy cheaper. Over 90% of new renewables projects produce energy at a lower cost than fossil fuel equivalents. In fact, just yesterday, as of me recording this video, the UK set new records for the amount of energy we got from renewables, both wind, as just wind, and all renewables together. And that resulted in the energy price in the UK being way lower. And as for energy security, renewables are not affected by autocrats waging war on the other side of the world. In fact, they're not dependent on anything other than the wind and the sun. Yes, they are intermittent, but they are not insecure. And to the people who are arguing that, oh, by buying these things, you're just increasing dependency on the places that build them, like China. Well, yeah, you are, but you're doing that once. You're conflating the difference between owning something and renting something. Once you've bought this energy infrastructure, it just works. Whereas if you depend on energy infrastructure that you have to keep supplying with fuel, that fuel's got to keep coming. If you miss just one shipment, suddenly the whole system can fall apart. And all around the world, in response to this energy crisis, country after country is turning towards renewables because it just makes sense. In the UK, the government has brought forward the next huge auction of renewables. It was going to take place next year. Instead, it's going to take place this summer. In South Korea, their president has explicitly said, we need to be building more renewables in order to shield us from energy shocks. And actually, on that point, the Climate Change Committee, which is this independent group of experts that advises the government on climate issues, estimated that the cost of getting the UK to a net zero energy system will be lower than the cost of one oil shock. And if you think this is the last one that's going to happen between now and even the end of this decade, I think that's unrealistic. Looking at everything that's happening this year, it is so easy to feel powerless. I totally get it. We can see that the planet is changing around us, and we don't feel like we can do anything about it. Something I'm trying to do in my videos this year is give you clear, actionable steps that you can take to make a difference as an individual. But let's face it, when it comes to big energy projects or reversing biodiversity loss, I mentioned, you are very limited in what you can accomplish as an individual. But fortunately, when we work together, apes together strong. In fact, a couple of months ago, I did a partnership with an organization called Planet Wild that does crowdfunding for nature. Basically, every month, the Planet Wild community funds a new project that is related to the climate crisis or biodiversity loss, and then share updates with what that money has accomplished via their YouTube channel. I became part of that community. I have their app on my home screen, and a lot of people watching my videos joined too. In fact, so many that Planet Wild are back sponsoring this video. I really like what Planet Wild are doing, both the individual projects that they're picking. I mean, the most recent one is building the longest biodiversity corridor in South America, connecting disparate populations in the Cerrado in Brazil, with other projects including building wildlife crossings across highways in Canada, restoring peatlands in Europe, and regenerating forest in Tanzania. But also the framework of Planet Wild. Like, it's a community. And I love when they announce a new project on the app, people react with different emojis, and you can see different countries' flags coming in from around the world. And you really do feel like you're part of this global community that cares about this stuff. And a community that's based around action. Like, it's not just raising awareness of a problem, it's doing something and then holding themselves to account with those yearly updates. If you'd like to join the Planet Wild community of over 20,000 members, then you can do so right now. In fact, the first 100 people to sign up with my code, which is Simon3, will get their first month of membership paid for by me. So to do that, scan the QR code that's on screen or go to the link that's down in the description. See if you can be one of the first 100 people. You can give however much money you like per month. Literally every dollar does make a difference. And then each month you get to see an update of what your money is accomplishing, both in the app and on their excellent YouTube channel. Please do consider signing up and making a difference to conservation projects around the world. And if you want to see them in action, check out their latest project in Brazil. Thank you for watching the video. Before we go, I do just need to thank some very special people. I'm only able to make these videos thanks to the generous support of my Patreon community at patreon.com/SimonOxFizz. Every video, I run a marble race with the names of all of my Patreon supporters in the mix, and the top 3 performers get shouted out. Patrons get early access to videos, they get exclusive content every month, notably a behind-the-scenes vlog, and at producer tier and higher, the names that you can see scrolling by on your screen, those patrons can vote on topics for me to cover in future videos. So thank you so much to all of my patrons for making this possible, and a special thank you to our winners, Pascal, Job Doretta, and John Walker. Thank you for watching the video. I'm sorry that this one is maybe a little too late. I would have loved to have made this like 2 weeks ago, but unfortunately I've been quite sick recently. If you enjoyed it, please do share it with people who you think would benefit from the information in it and potentially have been misled by certain people in the media. If you'd like to watch something else from me next, then here's a video I prepared earlier, and here's a video from the Planet Wild community. You can also check out Planet Wild somewhere on the screen and subscribe to this channel if you like me enough to see much more of me in the future. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.